The entire ship slowly tilts upwards until most of it is pointing deep in the ocean. And they do this because waves mostly move just the top layer of water. So with most of the ship below the surface, the waves can't really push it around. Then compressed air pushes the water back out, and the rear floats back up to the surface. You're dropped into a forest at night, barely able to see, and somewhere out there are other people who might want to kill you. Now, your only goal is to survive as long as possible, but everyone else in this forest has the exact same goal. So, if you run into someone, it's not guaranteed that they'll kill you, but you have no way of knowing that. And if you wait to find out, it might not end well. Which means, in this forest, the safest move isn't trust. It isn't curiosity, it's being the first to strike right away. But what if the entire universe is the dark forest, and every civilization out there is just another person in the dark? If one finds another, they can't know its intentions, meaning the safest move is to either strike right away or stay quiet and hidden, which could be the reason we haven't found extraterrestrial life. You see, we assume we're alone in this universe, but maybe we're just the only ones not hiding. If you drop gum onto the carpet and try to pull it out while it's still warm, it'll only get twisted into the fibers. This makes it harder and harder to remove. Instead, smear a bag of ice cubes all over the top. The cold temperature hardens the rubber inside, which makes it less sticky. Then scrape it off with a spoon and clean the spot with detergent and water to make it look like the gum was never there. Hold the ribbon between your ring finger and middle finger while making the peace sign. Then lay it over your middle finger and under your pointer. Loop it around your pointer and under your middle finger, making a figure 8. And after doing the same thing once more, pull the tail between your fingers. Next, pull the tail up and turn your hand over before threading the ribbon under itself. And after pulling it tight and cutting the tails, you'll have the perfect butterfly bow. The cable was tied and she ran down the 70-foot pipe. And even though bombs were dropping all around, she made it out the other side. You see, a soldier had bought her during a poker game, and she joined him on Air Force missions. As they were building an airbase, they had to lay an underground cable, but digging up the ground would take 3 days and make them easy targets for the enemy. So the soldiers sent the Yorkie through the pipe, running the cable in minutes and saving hundreds of lives. As you open the door, the light travels into your eye and sends a nerve signal that tells your pupils to shrink so less light enters your eyes. But inside your brain, there's other nerves nearby, including one connected to your nose and sinuses. And some scientists think that the signals can get crossed. So when bright light hits your eyes, your brain mistakes it for irritation in your nose, which causes it to trigger a sneeze. He had just finished playing a superhero on screen and went to visit sick children at a hospital. When they gathered around him, he refused to leave until he had met everyone. And despite feeling weak himself, he celebrated a girl's birthday at her bedside, bringing her the courage she needed. But what no one knew is that this superhero was also dying. You see, he had been battling cancer for 4 years, but he kept it a secret. And when he died 2 years later, people realized he had been fighting the same illness as the children he was there to comfort. They twisted the cloth and strengthened it with a wire. Then they attached the top to a motor line on the ceiling and stuck the bottom through a hidden slot on the floor, where a crew member could move the bottom in one direction while the top moved in another, creating a twisting effect. Next, they placed a miniature farm in front, and crew members blasted clouds of dust into the air. After filming the scene, they projected the footage behind the actor to create the illusion of a real tornado. He slid out the card from the dollar bill, and it pierced straight through the paper, even though the dollar was totally intact. And this works because the card was actually made from two identical cards, glued together at the top. The bottom half of one card was cut away, and when he wrapped the dollar around it, the flap hooked into the folded bill, looking like it was passing through the paper. Blend up the cornflakes before scooping out a ball of ice cream and rolling it in the crumbs. Then wrap the ball tightly in plastic and put it in the freezer for an hour. Once it's rock hard, whisk some eggs until they're fully mixed and roll the ice cream in it. Then cover it with one more layer of cornflake crumbs before dipping it in boiling oil for a few seconds. The crumbs are fried almost instantly while insulating the ice cream inside. And when you pull it out and cut it open, you'll have a hot, crispy shell filled with frozen ice cream. They would sit in the window seat of every other row down the plane. Then the second group would come in to fill the rest. And instead of people standing behind each other as they put away their carry-ons, you would get to your seat quickly, keeping the aisles clearer than before. Next, they would repeat this process with the middle seats, and then the aisle seats, making the entire boarding time way faster. But it also means families would be split up, so airlines never used it, which is why boarding still takes so long today. They built up giant seawalls, hoping it would keep them safe from tsunamis. But the waves crashed right over them, destroying entire towns and killing thousands of people. So when they rebuilt the towns, they stretched out the walls hundreds of miles along the coastline. Some sections rose almost 50 feet tall, with foundations going over 80 feet into the ground. That way, even if a huge wave crashed onto them, it would give people enough time to escape to higher ground. If a 9-volt battery was pressed against a nose ring, with the ends connecting to make a loop, the electricity would travel up the metal and straight into the skin. Now, the inside of the nose is moist and salty, which conducts electricity really well. So instead of just breaking the connection, it would make a complete circuit, and the electricity would flow through again and again. At first, it would just feel like a strong zap, but after a few more seconds, blisters would start to form, and if it was left on for long enough, it could permanently damage the nose. The manhole cover started shaking, then suddenly it launched into the air. The blast knocked people off their feet, and houses quickly caught fire. You see, liquid gas had leaked out of a tank and into the sewers, and when a spark ignited it, a massive explosion ripped through the pipes. 20 minutes later, another tank exploded, and since gas had poured through the drains in people's homes, this ignited too, setting their houses on fire. In the end, the whole neighborhood was leveled, and around 130 people were killed, making it the biggest explosion in Ohio's history. His leg was amputated after he got cancer, but after discovering that there was barely any money for cancer research, he decided to raise funds himself. He scooped up a bottle of water from the Atlantic Ocean and started running, hoping he could eventually reach the Pacific Ocean to pour the seawater in. He ran a marathon every single day, collecting donations from people he passed by. He pushed through leg injuries and even a severe snowstorm, determined to finish his mission. But a few months later, the cancer spread to his lungs, and he passed away before reaching the end. His story inspired people to run in his honor, raising over $1 billion since then and saving many lives. When Batman defeats the Joker, he could just kill him and be done with it. But instead, he just locks him up again, where the Joker will inevitably escape and end up hurting more innocent people. You see, Batman doesn't want to become like the man who pulled the trigger on his parents. But by not killing, Batman lets the cycle continue and more people get hurt. The question is simple. If ending one life saves multiple lives, then mathematically, wouldn't that be worth it? They hit the lock with a sledgehammer, then tried to open it with bolt cutters. And when they couldn't, the company called the lock unbreakable. But a YouTuber cut a slice from an aluminum can, slid it into the lock's barrel, and hooked it on the other side. When he yanked it, the lock opened, proving the marketing was a lie. Because of this, the company sent him threatening messages and eventually sued him. But in court, they admitted his technique worked and eventually dropped the case. The YouTuber went on to pick their other locks and posted even more videos. The liquid is poured through the opening and into the spinning roller below, which is kept freezing cold by a special cooling system. This allows the liquid to freeze into thin sheets of ice that are then shaved off by a scraper to make snow. By changing the settings, you can even make noodle shapes or ice as thin as needles. And after it's scraped out into your bowl, you'll have a delicious frozen treat. He had to shave his entire body before stepping into a human-sized pod filled with thick, slimy liquid. Then he was attached to thick tubes and cables to make it look like the machine was feeding him. When the pod opened, valves inside released, letting the liquid rush out. And he shot down through a built-in chute into a water tank below before a mechanical claw pulled him out. Wrap the rope over the stick like this. Take the loop and pull the rope over itself, holding the end in place. Next, take the new outer loop and pull it all the way over the end of the stick until it sits at the back. Finally, pull the ends to tighten the hold before doing the same on the other side. And once you have enough rungs, you can climb your own rope ladder. The massive stone would be lifted, cut with diamond saws, and tossed into a tumbler the size of Mount Fuji until the surface was completely smooth. Then a giant handle would be attached with titanium screws to make a curling stone nearly 10 feet wide. It would be placed on top of a giant ice sheet in Antarctica and yanked forwards with 2 giant tow trucks as 30 players swept in front of it, letting the stone glide across the ice. But because the stone would weigh around 40,000 pounds, if any of the players slipped, it wouldn't end well. He cut the laptop in half with a saw, then the phone, the TV, and even an entire car. You see, he was getting divorced, and his wife was supposed to get half of everything. So he sent half of each item to her and put his halves up on eBay. Now, the story went viral, and he ended up raising 2,000 euros from the listings. But a group of lawyers actually made the whole thing up as a prank. You see, they wanted to convince couples to make legal agreements before getting married by showing how messy a divorce could actually be. After the concert, he edited the band's Wikipedia page on his phone, then told the security guard that he was related to them. To prove it, he pulled up the page and showed his ID. And when the guard saw his name listed as family, he believed it and let the man backstage. When he met the band, he immediately confessed, but they found it so funny that they invited him in for drinks and even took his number. And the next day, their page was changed again, now listing him as a legend. They cut a cross into the wooden block and inserted it on top of the pillar. Next, they carved squares out of the 2 planks, locked them together, and placed the wooden brackets on top of each corner. Then they repeated this several times, using bigger and bigger planks on each level. And after stacking on several wooden pieces, they slid on a wide plank to make a roof. Whenever an earthquake hit, the force traveled up the pieces, getting spread out evenly along the way, while the interlocked shape stopped the wood from sliding around, letting the temple stand for hundreds of years. He lifted her onto his back and used a bed sheet to tie her to himself. Then he climbed into his truck, You see, she had collapsed from brain damage, and after surgery, her right side became paralyzed. But he refused to leave her, so he brought her on the road with him. Every day, he bathed her in the small truck with only a bowl of water and gently dressed her. Then he would carry her onto the highway to help her practice walking again. And after 2 years, she could walk over a mile. He was found alone on an island, the last tortoise of his entire species. Scientists brought him to safety because if he died, his entire species would vanish with him. So they brought in females from closely related species, hoping he could still pass on his genes. They waited for eggs, and some were laid, but none ever hatched, meaning there was no way to save the species. So thousands of people visited him, since he was the last one. Then, one morning, decades after he had been found, his caretaker found him motionless, and with him, his entire species disappeared forever. At noon, sunlight will travel down a shaft in the mountain until it lands on a metal wire. The sunlight will heat it, and the metal will slightly change shape. That tiny movement will nudge the clock's gears forward, keeping it aligned with the sun. At the same time, a massive pendulum will swing inside, driving gears that track time. So once a year, a small hand will move one space. After 100 years, the century hand will move. And every 1,000 years, the clock will display the new millennium. Now, the clock is still under construction, but when finished, it's designed to run for the next 10,000 years. A thin tattoo is pressed onto your throat, and once it sticks, the patch listens to every vibration from your voice box beneath the skin. Inside is a microphone and a wireless transceiver that sends your voice straight to your phone, making it clearer even in noisy places. But the tattoo could also sense skin resistance, picking up signs of stress, meaning it could detect when you're lying. And if that information was ever used against you, this tattoo could expose your secrets. Thankfully, it never moved beyond the patent stage, but it does make you wonder what's coming. Hold the key over a lighter until it turns black with soot. Then press a piece of tape onto the side, peel it off, and stick it onto a plastic card, transferring the shape onto the surface. Next, carefully cut it out and hold the keys together, trimming away any bumps or gaps until you get an exact copy of the key. When an acorn falls off an oak tree, a squirrel will grab it and run away. Now, some are sweet, so the squirrel eats those right away, but others have a chemical inside that makes them taste bitter, so the squirrel will bury those for later. But they bury thousands of these bitter acorns every year, and they don't remember all of them. Meaning, months later, the forgotten acorns start growing, spreading oak trees to new places, and starting the process all over again. She arrived at a party where everyone was told to wear white. But when she walked inside, cameras were rolling, while the room was set up for a wedding, and she was the only one wearing white. Now, her date claimed it was a fake wedding and asked her to go along with it to get views on Instagram. So she walked down the aisle and played along. But a few months later, he asked her to help him get his visa. And that's when she realized she had actually gotten legally married. Her signature had been forged on the marriage certificate. She took him to court and the judge annulled it. Wire a circuit board to record voices, then add memory chips that can store a couple hours of conversations and sounds. Lock that memory inside a tiny metal safe before connecting it to the power source. Then attach an underwater beacon that will start pinging if it sinks in the ocean. Seal everything inside a thick metal case and paint it bright orange so it can be easily seen if it's lost. Now you've built a small device that can outlast a plane crash. It can capture what the pilots said in their final moments, so we can determine what caused the tragedy. They rest their thumb on the controller's D-pad, but instead of tapping, they tilt the controller slightly. Then they start rapidly rolling their fingers over the back. Now, each hit from behind pushes the plastic forward, pressing the D-pad into their thumb. So every tap turns into a button press, while the thumb barely moves, meaning both hands work together, letting them hit over 20 presses per second and slide pieces across the screen almost instantly. As he eats, the soup would slide right out of the holes in his cheeks, so he pushes in solid plugs to keep everything contained. You see, he got his first piercing at 13 and quickly became addicted to it. Over time, he inserted larger and larger jewelry into his piercings, making the holes slightly bigger each time. And after years of this, they were so big that he could fit a hot dog through them. If they built the castle over 200 feet, it would need a giant flashing red light on top to stop airplanes from crashing into it. Now, this would ruin the look of the castle, as well as the vibe of the whole park. So instead, as they built each floor, they made everything a little smaller the higher they went. You see, things naturally look smaller when they're further away, and when the top is actually smaller, your brain just assumes it's higher up, which resulted in a castle that looks really tall, but is under 200 feet. If you took every car on Earth and crushed each one into a cube, you would get a pile that weighed over 2 billion tons. And if you melted it down and skimmed off the rubber and plastic at the top, you would be left with around 1 billion tons of metal. You could forge that metal into beams, enough to build your own Golden Gate Bridge that could stretch all the way around the entire Earth. Only there wouldn't be any cars to drive across it. The car blew a tire, swerved onto the sidewalk, and slammed into a fire hydrant. The impact ripped the hydrant out of the ground, and the pressure from the water launched it into the air. Just a few feet ahead, a man and his wife were walking to dinner, and they didn't see the hydrant flying towards them. It shot forward almost 10 feet, barely missing the wife, but striking the man in the back of the head, killing him instantly. As the sword hit the helmet, the slanted face caught the blade on its curve. This pushed the force sideways, making the weapon slide off. Now, if they thrust a spear straight at the face, the narrow slits forced them to aim for tiny gaps. But even if the tip found a hole, the metal rim would still catch it, stopping the spear before it killed the knight. He climbed into the rubber suit, then strapped on thick wooden sandals. And as he walked through tiny cities made of plaster, he pressed his heels down to look heavy, the way bears and elephants do. Now, even though the suit weighed around 200 pounds, and the studio lights heated it to 140 degrees, he walked on while the cameras rolled. And when the footage played back, he became one of the most terrifying monsters of all time. If you took a DVD and tried to make a copy, it would not work, because DVDs are locked with a secret code that only DVD players can read. But in 1999, a teenager made a tiny program that could break that code, letting you copy a DVD. Now, companies have tried to ban it, so a mathematician turned the entire program into one massive number. Then he tweaked it until that number became a prime number. Now, a prime number is just math, and you can't make math illegal. So now, when that number is turned back into the program, it turns back into working code that lets you copy a DVD. You would press a button and a satellite would uncover a 60-foot mirror. The sunlight would hit it, bouncing off before hitting the Earth. This would create a patch of light, letting you sunbathe even at night. But this would also take at least 3,000 satellites, clogging up the sky. Animals could lose their sense of night, flowers could bloom at the wrong time, and you might just piss off your neighbors. If you lean forward slowly, a spool inside spins, and the seatbelt slides out so you can move. But if your body jerks forward in a crash, it makes that spool spin much faster, which pushes two metal pieces outward, locking them into the teeth and stopping the spool instantly. Now the belt can't extend, which holds you back. Stab a straight stick into flat, sunny ground. Then place a rock at the tip of its shadow, marking your first point. Now wait 10 to 15 minutes before dropping a second rock at the shadow's new tip. You see, the sun moves west, so shadows crawl the opposite way. That means your first rock marks west, and the second marks east. Stand with the first rock on your left, second on your right, and just like that, you've found north. If you put the corn like this directly in the microwave, it will cook the kernels like normal. But if you use a special kind of dried out cob, place it in a paper bag and fold the ends over, and then put it in the microwave, the tiny amount of water left in each kernel will heat up, creating steam inside. Once the pressure gets too high, it'll crack open the shell, exploding right on the cob. And when you pull it out and add some butter and salt, you can enjoy your popcorn on the cob. He cut the ropes from the whale before its tail swung up and smashed into him. You see, for 15 years, he followed whales that were tangled in fishing gear. The ropes dug into their skin, cutting deeper each time they swam, stopping them from reaching the surface to breathe. So he cut the ropes, pulled the lines, and set dozens of whales free. And each rescue made him more confident while working inches away from the huge creatures. But the one he freed that day swung its tail as it swam away, and just like that, his final act of compassion became the cause of his death. They snipped off the leg of a cockroach and connected two tiny electrodes to it. Then they plugged the other end into a phone's headphone jack and pressed play. But as the music started, the severed leg began to kick, jerking in bursts when parts of the audio delivered enough current. You see, a headphone signal is really just changing voltage. The leg muscles were simply following the voltage. Years later, it became a simple way to show how nerves fire. He mapped out the circular design at the Hoover Dam before placing in hundreds of brass discs. He then stuck a flagpole in the middle that shows the imaginary line that Earth rotates on, while the discs mark where the stars were in the sky. You see, when Earth spins, it actually wobbles around like a spinning top, meaning the locations of the stars change over time. By recording every star's exact position, future scientists could dig up the Hoover Dam, compare the floor map to their night sky, and calculate the exact year the Hoover Dam was built. The needle is injected into your eye to numb it before a tiny cut would be made. Then the sides would be lifted up to create a small pocket, so a tiny charm could be slid inside. And when it healed, you would have a tiny heart sitting on your eye. But the pocket makes it easy for bacteria to get inside, which could cause serious damage. But even though it can make you blind, it's still perfectly legal in the Netherlands. When a lobster crawls inside a trap, it eats the bait first, before looking for a way out. But when it travels through a second opening, the walls get steeper and steeper, forcing them to move forwards until they reach the second part of the trap where there's no escape. Now, if the lobster is small enough, it can slip out of the tiny holes in the sides. And if the trap gets lost at sea while there's still lobsters inside, rings on the side panel will break down over time, letting them escape. They painted his head with a special gel and covered bandages with plaster to lay on his face. Once it dried, they filled it with more plaster, making a cast of his head, which they scanned and combined with a digital picture for an exact replica of his face. Then they inserted a skull design inside and carved down his face to show the metal parts. By combining this with CGI, the Terminator's face could strip away throughout the film, revealing the robot underneath. He lights the torch, then runs the flames over the cactus, burning the sharp spines right off the pads. They do this during severe droughts, when the grass has dried up, and there's almost nothing left for the cattle to eat. So the herd moves in and starts chewing the cactus. And because the thick green pads are full of water, it helps keep the cattle alive in the heat. But if the rancher can't burn the spines off fast enough, the desperate cattle will still eat the cactus anyway, which can shred their mouths.
তারপর থেকে টাকার বিনিময়ে মানুষকে মেরে ফেলি। আপনি যাকে মারতে চান আমাকে কিছু টাকা দিলে আমি মেরে ফেলবো। হ্যালো,
কি মরা যাবে?
কি বলো? তার মানে হচ্ছে আমরা যদি বিয়ে করে ফেলে তুমি মরে যাবা? আমি তো বিয়ে করবো না।
সারাদিন আমি যেন ভালো হয়ে চলি। আচ্ছা বাবা, কি হচ্ছে বলো তো? সারাক্ষণ কি নিয়ে চিন্তা করছো? শুভ, এই শুভ, এই যে
দলে দলে এত কিছু, হ্যাঁ? তা দুই একটা ইনিংস রেখেছিস নাকি সব শেষ করে দিস?
এখন আমরা যোগ বিয়োগ করব, ঠিক আছে? 7 যোগ 3 কে পারো? হাত তোলো। দুই ঘরের নামতা, এখন আমি জিজ্ঞেস করব। কি হয়েছে?
কান্নাকাটি করছিল জন্য আজকে ওর জন্য পিস্তল নিয়ে এসেছি। ভালোই হলো।
সেটাও ভাবছি, আবার এও ভাবছি যে এরকম একজন প্রভাবশালী।
আপনার লুক ভালো, তাই আপনি হিরো হতে পারতেন।
অবস্থা খারাপ করে
ভালো অ্যাক্টিং করেন।
হ্যাঁ, হিরো হতে পারতাম না। ওটা বাড়ি থেকে ফোন, মিথ্যা না বলি।
ব্যবসা করেন, অনেক বড় ব্যবসা।
বাইকটা নষ্ট হয়ে গেল। অনেকদিন পর বাচ্চাদেরকে এভাবে দেখলাম, খুব ভালো লাগছে, সুন্দর।
চিন্তার কি আর শেষ আছে রে মা?
আমি তন্নি, এখানেই থাকি।
আচ্ছা, না আমি এই রাস্তাতে যাচ্ছিলাম, হঠাৎ কাজটা করতেছি না, উনি ফোন দিচ্ছিল, তো একটু টেনশনে পড়ে গেছি, কাজে লেগে গেল, তাই না? আমি এটা রেখে দিই।
সত্যি?
আপনার কথা বিশ্বাস হচ্ছে না? খেলা মানে ওই আপনার মতো সামনে একটা ভাই আছে, উনিও বাচ্চাদের পড়ান যাচ্ছে উতলা, আমি যে না রাস্তা ক্লিয়ার করার কথা বলতেছে না, সে বিয়ে করতে চায়। আমার মনে হয় আপনার উচিত এসব ঝামেলা থেকে সরে যাওয়া।
হ্যাঁ, আর রাস্তাঘাট ডিস্টার্ব করবেন না।
মানে আমি তোমাকে ডিস্টার্ব করি?
ওকে, তাহলে আমি আপনাকে একদিন রান্না করে খাওয়াবো। আমাকে
জি।
কার ফোন ছিল?